broadcasts. We've got cable TV. We've got streaming TV. But yet, the government continues to spend $500 million a year to subsidize the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the National Public Radio, and PBS. And it ought to stop. It ought to stop. Here's some, I mean, I know there's been a lot going on about tariffs. I'm not happy with what's happening in the stock market. None of us are. It's been painful. I get it. But, you know, the stock market is just a reflection of the United States economy. And the American economy is the strongest economy in all of human history. And at this moment today, the current state of our economy is the best in the world vis-a-vis the other 195 countries in the world. You want to trade places with China? Not me. Not me. China's property market imploded. Their youth unemployment is over 20%. Consumer expectations in China are on a journey to the center of the earth. They're reporting 5% growth, which is not true. They have a deflation. Their prices are going down. You know why? Because their economy's so bad. I wouldn't trade places with the European Union. America's economy is much stronger than theirs. I wouldn't trade places with Canada. I'm not saying I'm happy that the Canadian economy is in the doldrums. I'm just saying that today, the American economy, despite the stock market, is the strongest right now in the world. Still, I'm not happy with what's happened in the market. It's been very, very painful. But if you believe in the American economy, then you have to believe in the stock market, and you have to believe that the stock market will recover, and I think it will. That's point one. Point two, any fair-minded person would have to conclude that Donald J. Trump is tough as a boot. Whether you like him or not, the man's tough as a boot. Whether you agree with him or disagree with him, we would not be in the position that we in America are right now but for him. And what is that position? There are 195 countries in the world. 70% of them are begging the president to negotiate a deal through which they can lower their trade barriers. Now, we know, this is another thing every fair-minded person knows, that many foreign nations have used trade barriers to hurt Americans and to hurt the American economy. God created the world, but everything else was made in China. Where do you think that expression came from? It came from China cheating through its tariff barriers and its trade barriers. President Trump, whether you agree with him or not, has said, I'm going to do something about it, and he did. He did. And boy, did he get the attention of every other country, including but not limited to those countries that have been cheating. They are now coming to the table. In Louisiana, we say they've come to the lick log. Do you know what a lick log is? A lick log is a tree, a fallen tree that farmers and ranchers used to go to, and they would hollow out a trough, and they put salt and other minerals in that trough in the fallen tree that cattle and horses like to lick, and it makes the cattle and horses healthier. That's what a lick log is. And an expression is when you get somebody to the table, you say they've come to the lick log. Well, President Trump has got these countries, 70 out of 195 have already come to the table and said they want to lower their tariffs. And I think that's a good thing. I've been preaching on this Senate floor for 2 weeks that what Prime Minister Carney in Canada and what President Trump in America ought to do is turn to each other and say, let's have zero tariffs. Zero Canadian tariffs on American goods and zero American tariffs on Canadian goods. Get government out of it. Let good Canadian companies and good American companies compete. Competition makes us better. May the best product at the lowest price win. I want to see that happen all over the world. And we've got the opportunity to help make that happen in the world, thanks to Donald Trump. And I know some people are mad at him, but we wouldn't be in this position with this kind of leverage without him doing what he did. He's a pit bull. He's a Rottweiler. We know that. Tough as a boot. But he's the pit bull that caught the car. And the issue before America right now, and I don't know the answer to it, what's President Trump going to do with that car? I don't know. I listened to his aides on television this weekend. They were all over the place. Here's what I hope he does. Here's what I'd do. I would sit down with each one of those countries that want to lower its trade barriers. Some go to zero tariffs. And I'd say, I'll take a dozen. I will take a dozen. And we'll do the same. That's what free trade is. And both economies would boom. I would take a dozen. And that's what I hope President Trump does. Vietnam is offering zero tariffs. Taiwan's offering zero tariffs. The European Union's talking about it. China's all bowed up, but they'll make a deal. And the only reason they're at the table lowering tariffs is because of President Trump. Take the deal, Mr. President. Please. Pretty please. With sugar on top. Take the deal. Our economy will roar. It'll be better for the world economy. I would be lying to you if I told you I knew what the president's going to do. I don't know what's in his head right now. I think I know what's in his heart. But I'm not going to try to feign omnipotence here in terms of what the future's going to hold. I don't know what President Trump's going to do. But I believe as much as I'm standing here that he ought to take these zero tariff deals. It'll be good for America. It'll be good for the world. He will have won. So, Mr. President, if you're listening, you're probably not. But if you are, once again, pretty pleased with sugar on top, you've won. Please today call Secretary Besant, your very able Treasury Secretary, and you and he sit down with every one of these countries that want to lower their trade barriers, and let's make a deal. Okay, let's lift America up. Let's lift the world up. Let's lift trade up. Let's reduce these trade barriers and let people compete. Let American businesses compete. Let foreign businesses compete. May the best product at the best price win. That's free enterprise. Mr. President, I suggest the absence of a quorum. I've talked, and I'm not going to repeat, I've talked a lot about the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and its two cousins, National Public Radio and PBS. The United States taxpayers spend $500 million a year subsidizing these media organizations. I've talked about that. There was a time when maybe we needed to do that, back in the 40s and the 50s, when we only had 3 TV stations and a handful of radio stations. It might have been necessary for the government to get in the TV and radio business, particularly to help our citizens in rural areas. But those days are gone. Now there are all kinds of forms of media. We've got TV, newspapers, radios, we've got the internet, we've got Facebook, we've got blogs, we've got podcasts, we've got cable TV, we've got streaming TV. But yet, the government continues to spend $500 million a year to subsidize the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the National Public Radio, and PBS. And it ought to stop. It ought to stop. President Trump's talked about it. Many members of Congress have talked about it. I've talked about it on the floor of the Senate. Now, some of my colleagues say the reason it ought to stop is because the so-called journalism being published by NPR and PBS, which get their money from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which gets its money from you, out of your pocket, $500 million a year. Some of my colleagues said, well, we ought to stop it because the reporting is biased. And they've marshaled a persuasive argument to that effect. I mean, I've talked about some of the articles that have appeared paid for with the American people's tax dollars. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll just mention a couple. Here's one: How Racism Became a Marketing Tool for Country Music. That's pretty fair and balanced, huh? Here's another one: The Hidden Racism of Young White Americans. AP fact check: Trump seeds race animus with COVID falsehood. Here's another one: Biden trumpets economic gains but struggles to get credit. Here's another one: Democracy on Trial, Part 1, a blueprint for the case against Trump. It's paid for with your tax dollars. This is opinion journalism. But it's not just at the national level. It's in my state, too. It's in Louisiana. Louisiana has 318 radio stations. Only 10 of them get money from federal taxpayers through the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. So the folks who are publishing the articles I just referenced are picked 10 out of 138 in Louisiana and said, we're going to favor you and give you money. My state also has 48 TV stations. 8 of them get federal money, your dollars. I don't know what the other ones did not to get federal money, but clearly this is a case of the federal government picking and choosing. Let's see what they've done with the money. Let's take this down. Put up the local ones, John. I'll just read you a couple of the headlines paid for with your dollars in my local public media organizations. How illegitimate critical race theory concerns shaped Louisiana's new social studies standards. No bias there. Trump's anti-trans effort is an agenda cornerstone with echoes in history. No bias there. That came from NPR and one of my local stations. Here's another: What it's like to choose transgender sex reassignment surgery. Another: Transgender boy tells mom it shouldn't be scary to be who we are. Here's another one. This came from WRKF, which also gets, it's one of the 10 out of 138 radio stations that the bureaucrats at CPB look with favor on. Kids will end their lives. Anti-trans legislation is impacting mental health in the Gulf South. No bias there. Biography examines how systemic racism shaped the troubled life of George Floyd. Nobody has to take responsibility. It's systemic racism. Here's another that came from WRKF. Christian nationalism support is strongest in rural conservative states. Another, Dr. Rachel Levine, focused on her job at HHS. Still, anti-trans politics followed her. Here's another one by WRKF. Another example of opinion journalism paid for with your taxpayer dollars. These far-right media figures are getting center stage under Trump. Let me see another one, John. But there's more, as they say on The Price is Right, or something like that. Here's another one. This came from Louisiana Public Broadcasting. Becoming Papa, Father's Key to Gender Justice. I can tell you that every mom and dad in Louisiana, when they lie down to sleep at night, and they can't, they're lying there worried about gender justice. Not. I mean, the article, the title of the article suggests what you ought to believe. That's not fair or balanced. Here's another one. Transgender athletes seek protections to play sports. Let me see the next one, John. Put that one up for me. This is John Lowry, who works with me. He's a fine American. I love this one. This is from one of my local radio stations in Louisiana. Arguments that trans athletes have an unfair advantage lack evidence to support. What planet did this reporter parachute in from? He or she really believes that men don't have a physical advantage over a woman in sports? Here's another headline. Trump embodies nearly every aspect of a racist, author says. Another, The Nation, confronting Trump's coded racism. This is coming from my local TV and radio stations that get money from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Here's another one. Sexism is out in the open in the 2016 campaign. That may have been inevitable. I wonder who the author of this piece voted for. Here's another one. Is Trump really that racist? I wonder who that reporter voted for. Here's the final one I'm going to mention. I don't want to put too fine a point on this, but scientists start to tease out the subtler ways racism hurts health. Now look, you don't have to be a Latin scholar to see that these articles are biased. Every single one of them. At the federal level and at the state and local level in Louisiana. And you know what? That's the right of these state and local television stations. They have the right to say this stuff. But they don't have the right to say it with your money. They don't have the right to say it with your money. Some of my colleagues are angry at the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and NPR and PBS because of their obviously biased reporting. Now, that's just a fact. No fair-minded American can look at these headlines and say those aren't biased. And some of my colleagues are mad about that. That's not what concerns me the most. I'm sorry they're mad, but that's not what concerns me the most. My question is this: what in God's name, what on God's green earth are we doing with a $36 trillion deficit and $36 trillion worth of debt, which is just accumulated deficits? Why are we giving certain TV stations and certain radio stations in America, but not others, $500 million a year? Why? They don't need it. And even if they did need it, they shouldn't get the money to the exclusion of every other media organization. What happened to treating all people and all entities similarly situated similarly? And so that's why I support abolishing the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. I want to say it again. The people who wrote these articles and the people who published these articles have every right to do that. I mean, I'm a firm believer in the First Amendment. Without the First Amendment, how are we supposed to know who the idiots are? I support the First Amendment. And these folks have the right to publish that. But they do not have the right to publish it with taxpayer money. $500 million a year. And we know how, I think you know how I feel. We know how President Trump feels, but I hope the United States Congress, in our reconciliation package, abolishes the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and no longer gives them or any media organization in this country a single solitary dime of taxpayer money. That's not the role of the federal government. And given these kind of articles, to do so incites the anger of at least half of our country. And that's not right.